Hola chicos, vamos a repasar y a practicar los conectores del subjuntivo. So you should have watched the first tutorial on subjuntivo to review the structure and the verbs, and you should have the handout of the conjugations of the verbs, so you have it as a reference if you have trouble remembering how to put the verb together, because I want you to focus now on connectors. So you should have the expressions that are followed by subjuntivo. Now we're going to look at specific connectors that need also subjuntivo. And we've been talking about the environment and how human beings impact the environment. So let's take a look at that. And the first thing we're going to do is review some of the phrases and the vocab. I took most of these phrases from the video Crecimiento Demográfico from Brain Pop. So if you look at this picture, mira la foto. La expresión más importante es basura. But I don't want you to just think of the word trash. I want you to think of the problem, because we human beings are making this. We are producing this. So we can say, for example, la producción excesiva. La basura itself is not a problem. It's the excessive production of it. So la producción excesiva de basura es un problema. La contaminación, específicamente la contaminación del aire, es un problema también. And we also talked about what we could do to help solve or minimize the problem. So in the screen you have different kinds of energy. El uso de energía alternativa es una solución. And we have la energía solar, la energía eléctrica, que es un problema porque no es una energía alternativa. El uso excesivo de energía eléctrica es un problema. La energía eólica o de viento es una solución. And this picture I Google, I don't really know why that is there, but anyway. También en la foto tenemos petróleo, carbón, gas, y son la expresión es el uso excesivo de los recursos naturales. El carbón, el petróleo y el gas son combustibles fósiles. También es posible el uso excesivo de combustibles fósiles, por ejemplo, el carbón, el gas y el petróleo. Un problema muy severo, muy grave, es la deforestación o la tala. Y la población, pero la cantidad de población que crece excesivamente rápido. Remember, crecer is to grow. La expresión es la explosión demográfica. So we have there some problems that we are creating for our environment. And for this particular so for this tutorial, you should have your accompanying handout, and you have there the connectors that have to be followed by subjunctive, and the exercises, so we can practice a little bit and so we can understand them better. And you have the meaning there. So make sure you have your handout ready. Let's start with the first two connectors that we're going to look at. A menos que, which means if not, okay? Si no, look at this si. This si is not yes, okay? And how do you know that? Because it doesn't have an accent. Yes, in Spanish has an accent. If it doesn't, is if, the conditional. It introduces a condition. And a menos que is unless, and unless means if not. And we also have en caso de que, which means provided that. And we're going to look at the meaning in a minute. All of the expressions and the connectors that you have on page 1, all of them are followed by subjunctive. Okay? But so we're going to look at the first one individually, which is a menos que. And as I said before, a menos que introduces a condition. In these structures, in these sentences that you guys are going to work with, you have two clauses. And the clause with the subjunctive is always followed, is always preceded by the connector. And the other clause, I want you to use the futuro, okay? And you should have the reference guide for futuro. So visually, if you see the connector, you have to right away make sure that verb is in subjunctive. So we have a menos que, and as I said before, that means si no, it's a condition. And right after a menos que, we're going to have the condition clause, the condition phrase. And that verb in that clause has to be in the subjunctive mood. And then you're going to have another clause, and that clause is going to represent the consequence of this condition. And that clause, the verb is always going to be in futuro. So let's take a look at some examples. So if I have this sentence, si no hacemos algo para proteger el ambiente, algo is something. Si no hacemos algo para proteger el ambiente, that's the condition. If we don't do something to protect it. And how do you know that's the condition? Because of si no. El planeta desaparecerá. The second clause is the consequence. If we don't do this, this is never going to happen. The only thing that you have to look at the verb. The second clause is in the futuro form, the verb. But the first one, hacemos, is not subjunctive. Why not? Because if in Spanish does not require subjunctive. But in level 3, so the second clause is the consequence. In level 3, we want you to use a menos que, which is a little bit more sophisticated, more formal than si no. So if we rewrite this sentence using a menos que, we would have a menos que instead of si no. Hagamos algo para proteger el ambiente. Look at the no. The no is gone because a menos que means if not. So I don't need to use a no there. A menos que hagamos algo para proteger el ambiente, el planeta desaparecerá, which is the consequence. So the second clause is always going to be in futuro, which is the consequence. So, a menos que introduces the condition, but the verb has to be in subjunctive. So you would be wondering, you must be wondering, what is the difference between these two sentences? In meaning, nothing. They mean exactly the same. The only difference is the connector and the form of the verb. But the idea, the message, is the same exact idea. Okay? It's the same exact message. So I want you to pause this tutorial, and in part 2 in your handout, then you have some sentences using if not. I want you to first of all find the condition and then find the consequence, and then rewrite these sentences using a menos que. All of these sentences, I'm asking you to use a menos que. And right away, even if I don't ask you to do that. Look at the connector. All of them have sino. And the synonym for sino in Spanish is a menos que. So remember that you find the connector in this particular exercise. This is going to introduce the condition. Same exact thing when you use a menos que. So you're going to get rid of sino, use a menos que, but be careful, this verb has to be in subjunctive. The first clause is going to stay exactly the same. You have a brief explanation with examples here. So, a menos que quiere decir exactamente si no. Si no, a menos que, son sinónimos. A menos que sea demasiado tarde, significa si no es demasiado tarde. So in other words, this and this phrase, clause, they mean the same exact thing. Now let's take a look at the next connector, which is en caso de que. Now, en caso de que is a subjunctive connector, it means provided that. It's always going to be again followed by subjunctive, but instead of a condition, en caso de que introduces a consequence. The consequence, it could be any consequence. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute. And that consequence that we're talking about is always going to be in the subjunctive form. The second clause is, in this case, kind of a precaution idea. We have to be aware that something is going to happen. So I call that clause precaución. And that one, again, that clause has to be in the futuro structure. Let's take a look at some examples. In this example, I'm just giving you the verbs, okay? The phrases, sorry. So mudarnos a otro planeta means to move to a different planet. That would be the final consequence if we keep destroying the environment in this case. And the other one is estar preparados, which means to be prepared. That is the precaution. Eventually that's going to happen, so we need to take precautions. We need to do this first in case this happens. Okay? So let's put the phrases together. En caso de que, when I have a pronoun in Spanish, I put it before the verb in this case. And then I conjugate the verb. So, en caso de que nos mudemos a otro planeta, estaremos preparados. We have the subjunctive following the connector, and then estar preparados is the precaución clause in futuro. Now pause the tutorial again and take a look at exercise 3 to practice en caso de que. So, I'm giving you two sentences. I want you to combine them using en caso de que. I'm gonna read the first one, which is the one I gave you in the example. So I'm not gonna read that one. Let's do number 2. Desperdiciar means to waste. And remember, morir is to die. So if I read desperdiciar todos los recursos naturales, which one comes first? Desperdiciar todos los recursos naturales o todos vamos a morir? This is the second one. We will die if we're not gonna do that. So you're gonna start with the consequence using en caso de que. For this sentence, we would say en caso de que. I don't want you to use this. That's why I put a line on top because I had to write a sentence. I want you to focus on the verb that ends in ar, ir, and I want you to conjugate that verb. So I did that deliberately because I want you to put the verb yourself. So, en caso de que, number 2, muramos, and this clause is going to stay exactly the same because this is futuro. En caso de que muramos, desperdiciaremos todos los recursos naturales. So give it a try. Take your time because I know this can be a little bit challenging because these connectors for subjunctive, it's not about just doing the rule. Okay, apply the rule after the connector. It's also related to meaning. And I want to challenge you guys focusing on more on the meaning than just putting the verb in the subjunctive form. Let's take a look at the next connector, which is para qué. Para qué is very simple. It introduces, it means to. Because it introduces an objective, a purpose, propósito or objetivo, and that has to be in the subjunctive form. If you take a look at all of these connectors, they have something in common, which is que. If you watch the first tutorial, subjunctive always has que. So para que introduces an objective, a purpose, a goal, and then the second clause is a condition, and that condition has to be futuro. This, I have to do this in order for this to happen. If I don't do this, this is never going to happen. Okay, so they are connected. The idea is connected. Let's take a look at the example. In previous levels, you use para, and all of the verbs after para in are. Para cuidar, para cantar, para bailar, para bajar de peso, para estar saludable. After para, you never conjugate the verb. So, and it means goal, objective, purpose. Para cuidar el medio ambiente, is the purpose, is the objective. Tendremos que ser responsables. This is the condition. I have to be responsible if I want to do this, which is to take care of the environment. But in level 3, we wanted to use para qué, which is a little bit more sophisticated. So, if I rewrite this sentence, then I would have para que cuidemos. I have to conjugate the verb, and I have to conjugate the verb in subjunctive. Para que cuidemos el medio ambiente, tendremos que ser responsables. The second clause is always futuro. Para que is one of the connectors that need subjunctive. So pause this tutorial again, and you have 12 sentences. You don't have to do them all. Do at least 6 to practice objectives or purposes with para qué and subjunctive. And I'm giving you the first part. I'm giving you the first clause. I want you to give me the condition. What do I have to do in order for this to happen, for us to reach that goal? And because we're talking about environment and consequences and human beings in general, I want you to use the form nosotros, if you can. Sometimes you won't be able to, but when you're talking in general, not just you, but everybody, we usually use the nosotros form for this particular exercise. So, let me give you an example for number 1. Para prevenir un desastre ecológico, para que prevengamos, that should be in your handout, prevenir is an exception. Para que prevengamos un desastre ecológico, tendremos que cuidar el planeta. Okay, and you can use any verb. Just try to use the verbs that are related to this unit. Okay, verbs that probably you got from El Crecimiento Demográfico video. Or you can just Google the verb that you want and then finish the sentence.